Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Stefano, and I will be your host for today. So before getting started, I would just like to ask you if you could make use of the chat you should find on your page right now, just to let me know that you can hear and see me just fine. Um, After I get a few confirmations, we can get started with today's webinar. So please don't be shy and just let me know if you can hear and see me correctly. Okay. Okay, I can see the first replies coming in. All good. Hello to you too. Loud and clear. Okay, that's perfect. All right. Everything okay. Okay, that's perfect. I think we can say we're off to a great start then. All good. Okay, that's perfect. Let's just wait a few more seconds so that everybody can join in the webinar today. And then I think we can get started. All good. All okay. Okay, that's perfect. Great. Okay. So yeah, I think we can begin then. So first of all, thank you for joining me today. Today we will be talking about backups and management of projects in Website X5 in general, but especially focusing on the different kind of backups that you can perform, that you can create and manage inside Website X5 to make sure that your work never gets lost due to anything that can happen. So we're going to be taking a look at how backups work, how they're made, what the files generated by a backup look like, how to restore them, how to delete them, the different kind of backups that you can create, and how best to manage them to keep your work safe. So that being said, I think we can move on to the first part of the webinar, which is the main difference between files when we're talking about the files that Website X5 uses to generate your website locally, and what actually gets uploaded online once you press the upload button. Because this may sound like common knowledge to some of you who are maybe a little more into information technology and how these things work, but it's not always something that is super clear in the beginning. So I really want to focus on that first and try to explain the best way I can the main difference between the files that are currently located on your computer as you are working on the website and the files that are going to be uploaded by the software online once you click on the upload button. And to do just that, I am going to be using a little image that the rest of my colleagues made especially for us. So let me just bring that up. There we go. You should be seeing the image right now. So yeah, let's start by explaining what we're seeing in this image. So the main way we can divide the file between files that get uploaded online and files locally is files that are on the hosting server, meaning on an external machine, and on the local PC, which is the local computer you're using to work with Website X5. So let's start with the green side first. So what happens when you launch Website X5? You go inside your project and you start making your edits. So essentially what is happening here is Website X5 is generating a few files. Wait, before moving on, let me say something, let me add a little something to this. I think when explaining a concept like this, it's usually much easier if you try and consider, instead of talking about code, you can think of it as a language. So in just any language like English, French, Italian, if you think of this as language, sometimes it's much easier to understand. So you can think of it as like Website X5 as you're working and modifying your projects. Website X5 is generating some files which are written in a specific language that Website X5 can understand. So it knows what all you do means. It can store this information in its own specific language. And whenever you open up a new project written in that specific language, the software is able to interpret it and show you all your project, your files, the stuff you've written. All of these files are the working files. So the files that Website X5 uses locally and that are stored on your computer locally, used so that you can visually create and modify your projects. Then you have the files that are uploaded to the hosting server, which is essentially, just to keep it real simple, is like another computer which is located somewhere in the world, where you go and put your published files. Um, and this computer, if we compare it to your local computer, once you upload those files into that external computer, that computer is configured specifically so that other users from all around the world can access and see the files you've uploaded. Because an hosting server is not much different than your local computer, except for the way it's configured. So while your local computer allows you to check your files from your home and sitting in front of your screen, the hosting server is just a computer that has been configured so that all users can access and see the files from remote. So once you are done working with your working files and Website X5, what the software does essentially is take all of these files that it has, that you worked on, then it converts them into a different language, which is universally understood by hosting servers. And all of these files are then moved to the hosting server. So all files have been effectively translated from the local language to the hosting server language. This conversion is what allows the files that are published to be visible and it's what makes them interactable by other users once they reach the hosting server. So this is just to explain that working files and published files are very, very different. Working files cannot be uploaded to a hosting space because they are written in a language that the hosting server cannot understand. So if you were to upload Website X5 files onto the server, nothing would show. Same goes the other way. So if you are working on a project and then you decide to upload the files online, Website X5 converts these files into the new language and puts them on the hosting server. If you were to take those published files and try to move them back onto your computer, onto Website X5, it's as if Website X5 was able to translate from his language to the hosting language, but is not able to translate them back. So it's a process that only goes one way, from the local PC to the hosting server. Why is this important? Because it is very important to understand that if you work on your files locally, then you upload your files online onto your published website, then something, whatever happens to your computer and you no longer have access to your working files, you cannot expect to download published files, and Website X5 is not going to recognize them automatically. Website X5 needs its own working files. Published files just won't do. And this is probably the main premise of the entire webinar today, meaning how to properly manage and safeguard your working files to make sure you never lose your projects. So once we got that out of the way, let me just close this down. We can move to the software itself. So I've got a little project here ready. I'm gonna open it up. And since we're talking about backup, um, most features regarding backups take place in step number 5, which is the export. So we're going to move straight there. And I'm gonna give you a swift overview of what all of these options do. So first of all, upload the website to the internet. What does this do? This option does exactly what I've anticipated before. So once you press this button and you go into the upload window right here, which is not important at this time, what happens is essentially the website, the website X5 is taking the working local files and is translating them into published files. Then the software is going to be taking these files and putting them online. This transformation, this translation is what allows files generated by Website X5 to be visible onto your hosting space once you upload them online. Again, without this translation, Website X5 files alone would not be able to produce a final website. You need this translation that the software does for you. Then we have the optimize the project section, which we are going to be talking about later. So let's move on to the bottom two options, which is export the project, which says export the project file to create a backup copy or to transfer the project onto another PC, or export the website, which is slightly different, which says export the website to a folder to copy onto CD, DVD, USB, or to change the HTML code. So these two options do very different things. Export the website, let's say essentially it's the same as uploading the website to the internet. The only difference is that while the translation I was talking about before, so from local files to published files, still happens, so this translation is performed by the software. Exporting the website simply puts all of these published files onto your local PC or USB drive or whatever you want, um, because this can sometimes be helpful in two situations. Although I understand these are not as common as uploading to the website. Perhaps one of good use of exporting the website locally as published files could be if you are into coding itself. This option allows you to modify manually the code for the published files. Again, this is very advanced, so this is something only people who are actively working with code might be interested in. But sometimes you also might want to create like a smaller website. You can also create stuff like I don't know if any of you ever encountered something like this. Sometimes you go to restaurants or pubs, and instead of giving you the menu on paper, you have to scan, for example, a QR code, and you are brought to a sort of web page where you can see the menu. This is another use that you can have when you export the website locally instead of online. So you have your actual website locally. You can have people access it locally, for example, in a restaurant, but it's not reachable from the outside. So this is the use that you can get through the export the website option. Much more important in our case at this time is the export the project option right here. If you open it up, you can see that it starts with a pre-made path of your computer. And then you can see that it tries to create a file with a peculiar extension, which is IWZIP. So this is not a common extension. This is not a common format for a file, because it's a specific format of file specific to Website X5. So only Website X5 uses the IWZIP file format. What is this format used for? Essentially, when you go into the export the project option and you start the export procedure, you will get this one file with this extension, which is essentially um, the entirety of your project, all text, all images, everything about your project is all compressed into one single file. This file is probably the safest form of backup that you can have in Website X5, because in one single file, you have the entirety of your project. So once you go and create this file and you get it on your computer, you can do whatever you want with this. You can keep it on your computer, or maybe, which is a much safer option, you can, for example, move it to a USB drive, or you can upload it online to services such as Google Drive or Dropbox, stuff like that. Because with this file, should anything happen to your computer, you take this IWZIP file, You get a new computer, you install Website X5, you feed this file into Website X5, and poof, your project will reappear exactly as it was in the moment you created this file. So if you create this and keep it safe, you know with absolute certainty that should anything happen to your computer, if you have access to this file, you can recreate your project from scratch in an instant without having to redo the entirety of the work you already done on the project before. So this is the most important, most safest kind of backup you can have. You can also add a few options to it that can help you customize your big backup, which is include a copy of the website preview files, which essentially means, when you open up your project and you click on preview to see the generated preview for your project, some files are generated by the software to allow you to see the preview of your website. When you move the IWZIP file to a different computer, once you open it up for the first time onto the new installation of Website X5, of course, the software will take a little time to generate these preview files again. This can be avoided if you enable this option. You can see it says the generated file will be bigger, but it will not be necessary to wait for the preview files to be recreated. So smaller IWZIP file, but shorter time the first time you open it up, the first time you import it back into the software, because the preview files do not need to be recreated again. You also have the option to include backup copies, again, which will make your project bigger. But I'm going to be talking about what kind of backup copies this is mentioning in a second, because it's a different kind of backup. And then you also have the option to optimize project resources, which essentially means once you are almost done with your website, this can be helpful because together with the IWZIP file, the software is also going to run a small optimization algorithm on the images, and is going to be deleting some maybe resources that are no longer helpful. Like, for example, let's say you used an image of some page, then you change that image to a different image, but it still is still present inside the project. So what this does is go and remove all those images that maybe were present in the project a long time ago but no longer are, with the sole purpose of making the project lighter. So to sum this up shortly, IWZIP file, one single file, the entirety of the project compressed into it, safest kind of backup you can have. The other kind of backup you can have is called snapshot-based backup, and it works in a slightly different way. So as I mentioned before, the IWZIP file is one single compressed file which contains the entirety of the working files that the software needs to be able to display your project and allow you to edit the project you're working on. The snapshot-based backup is different. How it is not a full backup of all of the resources that the project uses, but is only a backup of the main file. So if you only have that file for a backup, it's not going to be enough to restore a project. But that's okay, because it's not the way this kind of backup is meant to be used. I'm going to show you how to use snapshot-based backup and what some of its uses are by changing something inside of this project. So for example, let's go to step number 3, and we're going to be adding a new page and then add some random text right here. Okay, so we have this page added right here. So once I move out of the project is saved. And of course, the changes I performed are also saved. Now, if I go back to the window where I can open my project, we're going to be using this little button up here that says backup. We open this up, And what we can see is the backup management window, which is all related to the snapshot-based backup I was mentioning before. So what we have here is a list of these snapshot backups that the software backed up as I was working on my project. This one I created myself before studying the webinar. So I had a snapshot backup of the project before we created the new page. So if I go and create a new backup now, I now have two backups I can count on. If I were to restore the first backup right here and click on redo, I would get a version of my project when the page we just created was not yet present. If I were to go back and restore the first backup I did, the page would not be there. So this kind of backup management is best used when you want to have certain situations of your project saved in case maybe you make some edits and then you want to go back to how it was before. So these backups are used to create different versions of your project as you're working through it. In case you ever found yourself saying, oh wow, I did an entire modification of the project but I just really don't like it, I want to be able to go back to how things were before I started making these modifications, this is going to be your best friend in this case. You can just click on redo after I select the first one. It says restore successfully completed, and if I go and open up this project now and then move back to map, you can see that the page that I just created called test is no longer there because I restore the backup to a previous snapshot before the test page was ever created. So again, to sum up these two things we discussed, we have the snapshot-based backup, which is best used if you ever want to save different version of your website as you're working through it, in case you ever want to go back to a previous state before you did any kind of edit to it that maybe you didn't like, without having to manually redo all of the things you changed. And then the IWZIP file, which is the one compressed file which contains the entirety of the website, that can be used if you want to move the website to a different computer or put it online on a cloud service such as Google Drive or on a USB stick, in case something happens to your computer or you just want to move computer and you need to carry your projects along with you. So as you can see, very different, very different use cases. Okay, so that being said, the last part of this I want to show you is the optimize the project part, which is not really about the backup themselves, but the project optimization. Which, if some of you are used to this screen right here, you know that once you go into project optimization, you can click on start and you get this short analysis of your website, which essentially gives you some helpful tips on things that might need fixing or optimizing on your website. But what I want to focus on is the resources option right here. If you click on this, you have the option to export connected resources, export unconnected resources, and to delete the unconnected resources. You can see here we have a few. So what are these? Connected resources, as I was saying before, are essentially all of those images, maybe videos, maybe PDF files, all of those files which are essentially external to your website project itself, and that you decided to put into the project. So when you go and select an image you want to show on your website, what happens is that the software takes this image, it creates a sort of copy inside of itself to use in your project. Once this happens, it is called a connected resource. So the image becomes a connected resource. When does this image become a unconnected resource? Is when if at any time as you're working on your project, you decide to change the image, you put a different image in its place, and that one old image is no longer used anywhere on the website. So the old image is still technically inside the project files, but it's not used anywhere anymore. That's when it's called unconnected resources. So what this screen allows you to do at any time is, suppose you want to take all let's say let's put it like this. Suppose you have your main computer and you have your photographs on that computer, and you want to put those photographs into the project. You simply go and select them from your computer and put them inside the project. So now you have the photos both outside of the project and the kind of integrated copies that Website X5 made inside the project. Then you go and make an IWZIP file, as I mentioned before, because maybe you want to keep working on this project on a different computer. So you make that file, you move it to a different computer. Of course, you no longer have the original images on that computer because those were only on your main computer. So if you go here and click on this option right here, the software can take all of the images that it copied inside of your project file and export them outside. So you can have sort of another kind of backup for all of the connected resources that you used inside of your project should you move that to a different computer. The same goes, of course, for the unconnected resources with the export option. So you can take all of those older images, files, videos outside of the projects and get them back on your computer. Or suppose you are 100% sure that those unconnected resources, you're never going to be using them again. And essentially, they just add weight to your project because, of course, the more resources you put into the project, the more the project is going to be weighing. You can use the delete unconnected resources option. And what this does is make a full analysis of your website, keep only the files that are being actively used inside the project, and just delete the rest. Essentially making the project much lighter on your computer. And also, if you were to create a backup copy of it, again, the project is, of course, going to be much, much lighter to move around or to upload online. One very important thing to keep in mind with this, going back to the differences between local files and published files, is that when you're working locally, if you were to use this option to remove unconnected resources, these resources are only deleted from inside the project, thus making the project lighter. But if you think about your online project, so let's say you change some images and you upload your new website with the updated images online, this removal of old images is not going to be taking place online. All the files you upload online are always either written or uploaded again online. So if you have older images and you remove them from the project, they are still going to be onto your hosting space. Making the hosting space lighter, removing all the older files and stuff like that, is something that the software is never going to be taking care of. The software can only upload files onto your hosting space. It cannot automatically delete files. So if you were ever planning on making the files onto your hosting space lighter by removing some of them, you have to do this manually. So you have full control over the files and you're sure that no wrong file is ever going to be deleted online. Um, this is, of course, very important in case you're wondering why maybe you made your project lighter, but you still have a lot of files online. Deleting files online is a completely different process that usually is taken care of through through the hosting space panel itself, or you can do it too from this option right here, upload the website to the internet. Once you insert all of your data right here, you have the destination folder field and this little folder icon right here. If you click here, a new window is going to open and you can see your online files. So if you want to manually remove those, you can also take this route. But be careful, of course, because if you delete files from the online website, and maybe you delete some wrong files that you did not mean to delete, those files won't be visible anymore onto your website. So if you want to make those visible again, of course you just need to re-upload the website to the internet. So if you want to see this under a different point of view, you can think that published files are sometimes, we can say, less vital to your project, because if you ever were to encounter any kind of error, like for example you delete some files from online which you didn't mean to delete, as long as you have your working files safe onto your computer, you can just go here, click upload the website to the internet, and your website will be restored online in its entirety. It's an entirely different issue if you lose your local files, because without the local files, the software will not be able to restore a project and let you keep on working on that. So losing your local files means having to start a project from scratch, which is something we do not want to happen ever. So keep your backups safe. Make regular exports as IWZIP files, because you will be glad you did should anything happen to your computer, to your hard drive, to any working copy of your website. You are going to want to have that file available at any time to make sure you never have to redo any of the work you already did. Okay, so that being said, the one last thing I want to show you, because I think I forgot to talk about that, going back for 1 second to the snapshot-based backup. As I showed you, the IWZIP file backup is done by going to this option right here in step number 5. But how and when snapshot-based backups are done is entirely decided by this window right here, this button and this little arrow right here, which opens up this window. And here you have all the options you need to decide when to create a snapshot-based backup of your project. So you have your create a backup copy, which essentially gives you full freedom to decide, okay, I've reached the point in my project where I want to keep this version in case I ever make some change that I wanna go back from. So you can manually create them, or you can have the software create them for you automatically at given times when saving the project for the first time, or create a backup copy every time you upload your website online. If you want this one, or if you want the other one, or if you want both, you just click on them and you can see that these are now enabled. So the software will be creating a backup copy, a snapshot-based backup copy, every time you upload your website online, or whenever the project is saved for the first time. You might be afraid that having something like this can make the project a little heavy in size. And you would be right if you get used to making a lot of backups. But going back to step number 1, where you open up the project and you go into the backup management window, you also have the option to automatically remove backups after a given amount of days. So you are sure that you are never going to have too many backups that your project becomes just unbearably big. This also, of course, depends on the size of the project. If your project is relatively small, having many backups is not going to impact your project size by that much. But if perhaps you are managing, let's say, an e-commerce with a lot of products, or maybe some kind of gallery with many images, backups can sometimes make your project grow in size out of control. So having the software automatically remove backups after a given amount of days, and always keeping in mind that you can keep a minimum number of backup copies, is going to be a very helpful tool to make sure that your project never gets too big just on backups. That's what these options are useful for. So that being said, I think we went through all of the main topics of today's webinar. So I would like to move to the final part of the webinar, which is giving you the possibility of asking any kind of question you might have about backups or anything that I've talked about today, in case some things that I've shown wasn't really clear, or maybe some of the explanations I gave was not as clear as you'd hoped it'd be. So if you have any question at all about the matter we just talked about, feel free to ask me now, and I will be more than happy to try and answer them. So let's see. Of course, if nobody has any questions, I'm just going to assume, like I always say, it's kind of growing old at this. But as I always say, if none of you have any questions, I'm just going to assume that my explanation was crystal clear and everything I explained was super easy to understand, or maybe I just explained them very well. So let's see. I can't really see any questions popping out at this time. So yeah, I guess I actually might just be that good. Okay, let's just give it a few more seconds. Very clear. I purchased Website X5 last week. Well, welcome to the family. No questions yet. The webinar was fine. Thanks. I'm very glad to hear that. So yeah, then I guess we can call this quits. So if you think of any questions after the webinar is already over, keep in mind that you can get in touch with me or any of my colleagues through our many channels, such as the official Help Center or via email. We will be more than happy to assist you with any doubt you might have left outstanding. So that being said, again, thank you for joining me today. In case you missed part of the webinar, or maybe you just want to refresh what we just said today, you can find this video on our official YouTube channel, which is under Incomedia, of course. Both this webinar and the webinars we did in the past, you can find them there, so no worries. Yeah, thanks again for joining me, and I guess I'll see you at the next webinar. Have a nice day, all of you.